Um, a Palestinian who made a documentary of sorts was awarded an Emmy for, let me tell you exactly what it was for, uh, outstanding hard news feature story short form. That Palestinian who made it is called Bisan, and the name of the documentary is it's Bisan from Gaza, and I'm still alive. Yeah, she is still alive. 2,000 plus Israelis since October 7th are no longer alive. That's not mentioned in the documentary. Something else that's not mentioned is October 7th itself, except as we've been bombed since October 7th. And, this is the kind of documentary you expect to see in Al Jazeera. By the way, it's 8 minutes long. We will share the video for anybody who wants to watch. Um, you'd expect this from Al Jazeera, but giving it an Emmy, even though we know what Hollywood is, it's still in America. It's still you walk around and it's a nice place. Well, it's a somewhat nice place, depending where you go. And yeah, you would want to think that there's some sort of connection between what's done in Hollywood and what's given awards in Hollywood to the Western culture and the idea of freedom that allows the type of stuff that Hollywood produces to be made. But yeah, in this case, they awarded this sort of poster child of Palestinian victimhood for what she made for Al Jazeera, the Qatari propaganda network. This was on AJ Plus, which, as far as I can tell, is like the uh, you know cool kid version of Al Jazeera, and yeah, so we watched it so that you don't have to, but you still can if you want to. And yeah, we're gonna talk about some of what's in it. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Marco, Richard, and Michael. Michael, your thoughts on this documentary and on Hollywood celebrating it?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I noticed when my kids were going to public school in Newton, Massachusetts, which, by the way, has a very high proportion of Jewish people, is that most history seemed to be being taught based on anecdotes, sort of individual view of entire historical situations. It would be like deciding that the entire 1960s were Kennedy being shot, and you just heard it from Jacqueline. You would just ask her view of what happened in the 60s, and she would give you her view only and nothing else. And it's remarkable that we have this kind of thing, and that becomes history, and that becomes the sort of reference book, if you will, for history. So that's point number one. It's completely in keeping with, I think, what a lot of the educational corruption that's going on in America and elsewhere, when we don't talk about big movements. The second thing is that while the documentary might be considered interesting, I mean, that documentary was no different than any young person in any place, including at the music festival, except at the music festival, there were actually animals coming after her, animals being Hamas, coming after people and trying to kill them and rape them and kidnap them and so on. And it's no different than what's going on in the Ukraine. It's no different than what's going on in any war-torn part of anything in the world. Frankly, the living conditions there are not that different than some of the places that are not having wars in the world, where where they don't have a lot of food and water and so on. It is ridiculous, the whole thing. It's not despicable because, it's one person's view, but the fact that Hollywood has trumped, made this into some sort of amazing triumph is what is despicable. And the fact that this is what is purported as a view of the world, and it's obviously Israel's fault that this poor girl is living in these horrendous conditions, as you said, without any context of how it all ended up there is the problem. And it's part and parcel for Hollywood. They live in La La Land surrounded by security, and the rest of us should just go on and live our lives normally.
Richard.
I was in two minds about whether to watch this documentary or not when it was put on the list for today's show. I did in the end. And then in for a penny, in for a pound, I also watched one of the other nominees on the list, which was from The Guardian, which was called something like a day in the life of a 7-year-old girl in Gaza, something like that. And to be honest, at the end of seeing both of them, in my head, I've kind of merged the two together because they all come from the same stable, really. And the fact that I can't tell The Guardian from Al Jazeera already says volumes about what constitutes journalism in this day and age. And that's got nothing to do with impartiality, nothing to do with representing reality. It's got to do with the exploitative nature of taking children as subject matter and excluding all else and making a highly focused, highly narrative driven piece that has a very set agenda to it and is intended solely to drop lots of context and to persuade you of one thing, that Israel is evil, without explaining why. It's a sort of lurking evil in the background constantly. And this is just the victims of this anonymous but labeled Israel evil. And I think that the fact that those two documentaries are whether you've got a Western media or whether you've got media like Al Jazeera, and of course, the producer who accepted the award on behalf of Bissan was a Brit, receiving the award at the Emmys, with a past that seems to have included places like Channel 4, for example. Well, again, that's no surprise, is it? So it all says such a lot about the state of journalism today, and especially as Michael pointed out there, that anecdote-driven, very, they call it human interest, but it means not focusing on the real story, not focusing on the principles and the picture, but taking, one family or one particular child or whatever as being somehow representative of every fact involved in this, regardless of the cause and effect, and where the events that you're being given a slither of actually fit.
The most shocking thing is that in a category of five nominees, three were about Gaza. One was about a Russian soldier whinging the war is bad, and another one was a diversity token, just to show that they really care about non-white people. It was about Haiti. They suddenly remember that there's something else going on in the world. But the other three, as Richard pointed out, are exactly the same. You cannot distinguish them. It's always, again, children in a war zone. And why is that? Because it's the most emotional subject you could pick. Nobody will feel anger towards a bunch of children struggling because their parents are terrorists. But we're supposed to condemn Israel because these people have created a short. The category, by the way, was short, so they're all 8-12 minutes films. But the great scandal is that the winning one, the girl in Gaza, is actually considered journalism in itself. I mean, in the middle of it, she just screams and cries. So she goes into emotionalism. And even the worst of the pro-Hamas propagandists here in the West, take for example Jeremy Bowen, if he did that in the middle of a broadcast from those hellholes, it would be condemned for not being partial. So why suddenly this kind of journalism, this kind of pure propaganda is considered journalism? Because this woman is actually acting up to camera, showing how bad the Israeli are. And everything is very much, it's a sequence of disintegrated images. It's very disjointed, lots of editing and picking up totally out of context events, which in themselves are not even particularly shocking. But the shocking thing is that the Academy, well, it's behind the Academy Award. It's not quite Academy Award. It's association. Yeah, the Emmy people are effectively pushing the propaganda, weaponizing even the news in order to push their Marxist propaganda, the Marxist agenda. And it's not a surprise that behind every single Palestinian pushing machine, there is some kind of lefty agenda. Happens, it's not a surprise that the Democrats are supported by the Muslims. It's not a surprise that the Labour Party in Britain is supported by the Muslims. It's not a surprise that this woman was allegedly a member of the Popular Front or Liberation of Palestine, which is a Marxist-Leninist group. Incidentally, it's a terrorist group. It's like Hamas and all the other friends. So there's always a presence behind whatever happens. Every time somebody pushes in your face the Palestinian agenda, it's always just a weapon. It's just something that they use in order to push the real agenda. But they don't care who they associate with as long as they are allowed to do whatever they want.
Thank you, Kathleen, for gifting 5 Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube memberships. People who got gifted memberships, you have those memberships for a month. I hope you'll make use of them, including from right after this show, where we have our members roundtable. YouTube members can watch that live stream and participate in the chat. Members through the website can join the Zoom call. Yeah, there's a lot of other perks, so I hope you enjoy them. Something like 20 years ago, I remember watching this movie on television in Israel that was called One of the Hollywood 10. And this was about, when communists had some trouble in Hollywood because some people didn't want to work with them because they were communists and they were creating propaganda against their own country and in favor of a country that it should have been acknowledged was an enemy. And it portrayed them as these sort of heroes fighting against some sort of tyrannical power, which was the United States, and in favor of liberation, which was the Soviet ideal. I remember watching that, and I was early on in my political journey, and I already had problems with it. And when you have a movie translated, that title is very often not translated verbatim. You have to kind of translate the meaning of it. So one of the Hollywood 10 was translated into Hebrew, and the movie was called In the Shadow of McCarthyism, which I thought was an ironic title because this was something about something that happened in the 30s. McCarthy became a senator in I believe 1950 or 1948 or sometime around that time. So even what leftists imagined McCarthyism wasn't around, and so this is nothing new. The point of this story is this is nothing new, and it's like, will people in Hollywood ever learn a lesson? And what has to happen in order for them to learn a lesson? Like, do the things they advocate for actually have to happen in the U.S. For them to think, hang on a second, maybe this is not in our best interest. Maybe we should embrace the culture and the ideas that gave rise to the culture that we live in, rather than embrace somebody, not just somebody, anybody who advocates for dictatorships. So some of the stuff that you see in this documentary again is she's showing Palestinian suffering. She's talking. At some point, there's a text on the screen. Israel has cut off access to food and water and limited the entry of humanitarian aid. Nobody's saying, well, Israel was feeding, was giving water and electricity to Gaza, which was, I'm sure used to feed kids, but also used to indoctrinate kids and used to plan and carry out terrorist attacks. And maybe Israel isn't too keen on actually helping that happen. So maybe that might be a reason that none of that comes up. It all portrays the people of Gaza as these poor victims who are suffering under some sort of brutal aggression, rather than fully responsible for the brutal aggression, for the fact that there is war. Michael.
Well, that it's really amazing to me that suddenly war is this whole new entertainment industry, I guess, and somehow it's supposed to be okay. I don't. It's beyond me how this works. War is war, and people come and attack you, and you need to attack back. And the notion that there are good places to be when you're being attacked back is ridiculous. The fact that this war was started by Hamas, which has a dedicated goal to annihilate Israel, is of course not part of any of this discussion. And that's the fundamental problem. Not that this girl and a lot of other people in Gaza are suffering. That's frankly, it's their fault. And they need to be clear about that. This was an election. Hamas was elected. The Palestinian Authority was thrown out. And they chose Hamas, and Hamas decided to declare war on Israel. And just like Hitler decided to declare war on Germany, war on the Allies, the United States and the Allies, United Kingdom and France initially, and then the US. And then we responded. The Allies responded. I don't understand what has happened and why, frankly, why our newscasters and why people reporting on this don't get it. I'll just point out that there's one of the interesting characters, I think, in America right now who does a lot of political commentary and is a comedian is Bill Maher, who's known pretty much as a Democrat and has become very centrist. But he always gets very angry with the left and these kinds of Hollywood baloney. And he says, stop showing us pictures of children suffering in Gaza. This is ridiculous. It's not relevant. Of course, nobody wants to see children suffering in Gaza, especially the Israelis. And the Israelis didn't start this. And frankly, a lot more Israeli children were harmed initially that led to this situation. It really has become absurd. And I hope that people that normally would remain quiet and are rational people will start to speak up and say, we don't want to hear this crap, because we know it's just manipulative crap. And you want to fix the war, get rid of Hamas.
Yeah, I just have to comment quickly on Bill Maher. He has always had this inner conflict of he was always pro-Israel and he was always very left-wing, and it really didn't sit well. I think the left now he has more problems with the left because wokeness doesn't really fit the some of his personal preferences, if we should call it that. And yeah, it's interesting with many of these characters on the left, especially on the left, but there should be more of them on the right as well. Seeing the left move to where it's moving, seeing the right move to where it's moving, ending up rejecting it or feeling rejected by it, and a personal advertisement for us is this is where we come in. The alternative is not what you see on the other side; it's what you see on this channel. Marco.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally textbook Marxism, to destroy the institution and replace them with something which is pushed by the elite of the enlightened people who can lead the people by making them suffer. But of course, they will be the one who reap the benefit from the new dictatorship. And Israel is just in the way of these people. Israel, unfortunately, because they're using the Palestinian cause and the Islamic cause as a weapon against the existing civilization, just to destroy it from within often, Israel happens to be in the way because Israel is the democracy in the wrong place. In the Middle East is the only democracy where, incidentally, Arabic people live in freedom. They're the only free people in the Middle East, and it happens to be also very, very successful. It's a kind of place where you are able to rig a pager or a walkie-talkie and destroy your enemies. I mean, who else could do that? A bunch of clowns from Middle Ages that they can't even, they can barely light a fire. I mean, just look at the kind of places where they live in. If they didn't spend all the money that we gave them in order to dig holes and hide weapons and missiles, which, by the way, they don't even make, they had to import them from Iran, they wouldn't even have that. So Israel happens to be a problem for the leftists right now and has to be solved. And how do we solve it? Well, we haven't got the military capacity to do it. So we help the other side, the fight that actually physically trying to destroy Israel, with propaganda, with support, creating a sense in the public opinion that Israel is in the wrong. And this is going through the media, going through Hollywood, or in various guises. We see constantly that if there is a bad guy, is the Israeli defending himself. And that's why it's nice to see things like Netanyahu suddenly seems to have found the spine, standing up to Macron, standing up to Biden, and standing up to the whole UN. It's beautiful that immediately after his speech, the headquarters of Hezbollah has been hit with a massive attack, and showing that they don't care. Israel seems to want to live, which is beautiful to see, because the longer Israel lives, the more these buffoons will meet the 72 virgins. And the only way to reach a stable peace is to get rid of the people who are against the law, who are against the peace itself. And also the push about international law and all this kind of Israel seems to be the bad guy who doesn't play by the rules. Well, there was a rule in 1948 that said the state of Israel should be in a certain way. The UN specified the state of Israel. And that was never allowed to take place because everybody around Israel attacked it, and since then has tried to destroy it. There's never been a moment where they sat on a table and say, okay, you have this land, we take this piece, because they don't want Israel at all. Israel is a big problem that has to be dealt with in order to allow the establishment to destroy civilization and set up some kind of dictatorship, whether it's Islamic or communist dictatorship. They don't care, as long as they're going to be the people sitting at the table eating a big fat lunch while we're all slaves.
I think what I wanted to add was to do with award ceremonies lately generally. I mean, it's long been the case where they're a stage for performative grandstanding, hasn't it? And that's what's trashed their viewing figures among things like the Academy Awards as well as things like the Emmys. I mean, in the production meeting that we had a little earlier, jointly with the TDO, the Daily Objective production meeting, James Valiant was there, who lives in Hollywood. He was recalling the 70s, for example, where Vanessa Redgrave, receiving an Academy Award, started talking about Zionism and was slapped down publicly on the stage, and in auditorium clap the slapping down of her, because that wasn't a place for political grandstanding. Well, my God, have we moved on since then? Where the opposite would be the case. The crowd would be clapping the grandstanding and not the slap and booing the slap down, wouldn't they? Same as we saw at the last Academy Awards.
Slapped, or do you mean just like...
I mean metaphorically, not in a Will Smith sense, but yes, yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah. But although, of course, that incident itself speaks volumes about the degradation of the culture and the loss of glamour and prestige of the event itself. But I think returning to the main subject here, which is of course the grandstanding is evident in the nominating of this particular documentary. That the knowledge about what was known about Bisan Auda, the woman behind it, and the fact that it still went ahead as a nominee and was subsequently voted as the winner by behind the scenes. That says an awful lot as well. But I think the key point here is if you've got I've got a 3-word question, really, because you've got journalism and you've got this kind of propaganda, and they're sort of packaged together. And then you're deciding, based on that package, what is the best of that kind. So my 3-word question, both to what is journalism and what is the best of it, is by what standard? Because that is really the crux of it, isn't it? By what standard is this journalism? And by what standard is this the best of all the journalists' offerings on the table? Because is it correspondence to reality? Is it representing the truth? Or is it being successful at being a piece of propaganda? Is it the propaganda awards that we're really looking at? Because that's kind of what it feels like.
Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says Iran's goal is same as Hitler's global evil one world dictatorship. deals with them are impossible. Yeah, by the way, Trump today said that he would consider a deal with Iran. So again, I think when it comes to his policies on Israel, he is preferable to Kamala. When it comes to Ukraine, I think it's the other way around. But even in that sense, neither one of them is good on either of these topics, and it's unfortunate that these are the options you have, America. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Christian, for the super chat. Christian says, after seeing my foreign minister talking in favor of UNRWA, like most of Europe, I think we will stay in the vicious cycle of ceasefire and war forever. It's hopeless. Christian is from Luxembourg, so yeah, the Luxembourg foreign minister. There's money in Luxembourg, right? That can be given to UNRWA. Why not? Yeah, this is what the UN General Assembly was. It was one country after the other getting on stage, having their leaders get on stage and say why Israel is the bad guy. I was saying a couple days ago that I think Milei's speech is, if you want some hope, listen to Milei's speech. The fact that speech was given on the UN floor is a reason for optimism to some extent. And if he was elected in Argentina, why not somebody else in some other country? A couple of updates on the topic that I was hoping this would become during the show, the topic of the show. So there's reports that Netanyahu is leaving New York now, having given his speech, coming back to Israel sooner than planned. It was a major scandal in Israel that he was going to stay the weekend in New York. It always annoys me that, somebody who deserves a lot of criticism gets criticized for things that are really, really unimportant. And as is often the case with breaking news, you hear some things and then you hear some other things. So earlier, it was reported that Israel notified the U.S. Now the Pentagon has said that they were not notified and that Austin was on a call with Gallant while the attack was happening. You know what? If you're gonna side with Israel's enemies, maybe Israel isn't gonna notify you when they go after these enemies. That's a possibility. If you want advanced knowledge, maybe make it clear which side you're on, and it shouldn't be the one that you're actually on at the moment. Right, I had more stuff to say about the documentary, but I'll say it after the next round. Michael.
Yeah, I wanted to just point out that I do think that, as you said, Netanyahu is growing a spine now and understanding that Biden is not on his side at all. And also that Biden has no understanding of the Middle East. Biden has done nothing to stem Hezbollah in the last 11 months. It hasn't, if he's done anything, it hasn't worked, so it might as well be nothing. Macron suddenly decided that Lebanon shouldn't look like Gaza, but he only decided that after Israel started to attack. The fact that 60 to 100,000 Israelis are missing from their homes in the north was okay. It's when the Lebanese started to get displaced that it became a problem. But I think there's another important effect of the way Israel used to behave, and I hope what we're really seeing a turning point. And that is when you start to believe the criticisms and you conduct a war the way they have in Gaza, which was anything but efficient and hardly can be considered effective, given the time it's taken and the loss of Israeli soldiers and so on, and the fact that the hostages, many of them are still there, 40% of them are still there. Your enemies and critics start to say, well, you don't even believe you're in a just war. When you start to act like you're actually fighting a war and you give a speech like he gave at the UN and you back it up with taking out Hezbollah's, headquarters underneath the ground, of course, underneath residential buildings, because only Israel has to abide by international law. The rest of the world doesn't. Then people at least will pause. But if you don't act like you believe that you're doing something just, people are going to continue to criticize you. And I think Israel behaved in such a bad manner, largely because I think the US probably tied a hand behind their back, if not literally, then certainly monetarily and with arms, and has continued to play games with the arms. But I hope we're really seeing a change now, because it's a lot easier to believe in people when they believe in themselves.
Richard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, well, throughout the show, I keep hoping Razi's going to interrupt us with some breaking news. So I feel free to butt in at any point, even if I'm mid-sentence, because I'd much rather talk about Nasrallah's demise, to be honest, than the demise of Hollywood. But Hollywood it is for the moment, and certainly it is the demise of journalism, the fact that nothing is about thinking anymore. It's all about emoting. It's all about a sequence of emotional jumps, or emotional melee of images, mixture of images, like a kaleidoscope of images that just leave you bludgeoned with a sense you are supposed to feel X, as opposed to any kind of thinking involved at all in presenting what's described as journalism. None of the steps, the logical steps that take place, none of the explanations as to what's happening, and particularly with this form of journalism, which takes one person with some video footage on the scene, and then later on adds in a few bits of text inserted in between each section to remind everyone of the word Israel, so they can see it in nice big font and read it and know that that's the they she's talking about all the time, and that. It's only that addition afterwards that gives it any sense of a link, and that link is only actually the propaganda link, not the actual fact link about what event is being shown at any one time. I don't really understand any more about any single event that she was depicting after seeing it than before, because you're not supposed to understand it. You're not supposed to understand where a bomb has landed, what's hit, where, why here. You've got no idea. You're just being given a sense of chaos and the distraction of don't look, don't ask, just feel.
Yeah, that's the point. That's why she goes into emotionalism, because people understand that it's a perfect vehicle if you want to transmit some kind of information without actually giving you information. And one of the things she shows is the outside of Al-Shifa Hospital with the tent set up by the EU, with the big logos and all this kind of stuff. And she omits to mention the fact that, well, first of all, Hamas bombed one of its own hospitals. She doesn't mention that one. She doesn't mention the fact that there was a fight in the hospital itself because Hamas terrorists were hiding it and were fighting against Israelis. And Israelis, boots on the ground, risk and lose a few lives of young kids from the army because they didn't have the spine to bomb the whole bloody thing and get rid of the terrorists in one go. So this is the kind of MO. Israel alerts people on the ground, we're going to bomb. So everybody runs away, the rats from Hamas, the rats from Hezbollah, and you're left with a few people who didn't manage to get out fast enough. However, the very fact that you live above the central command of Hezbollah, or you live next to the Hamas, whatever military facility they have, well, it's on you. You should know that living next to this kind of stuff will end up with your death, or certainly the destruction of your home. But this kind of stuff is not even covered. But what I actually did after the initial reluctance watching the video, I watched it a second time, and on this time I focused on the things she didn't want us to focus when she puts the image right in front of your face, or the words right in front of your face. Look at the background. Look how well most of the buildings are actually standing in Gaza. Look how incredibly targeted the bombing from Israel are. That goes to show that the line side is the one that you actually watching. Is the people that make you want to see the pain and the destruction, which is not there. And if you look at the state of the buildings around, they are literally untouched. So you can, the moment you argue that Israel is deliberately targeting civilians, you effectively call yourself a liar because you can actually observe in their own propaganda that's a lie. And that's the kind of stuff that they seem to not realize when they try and do this kind of little documentaries. They actually let some of the truth out. But if you choose to focus on the word that she tells you, well, of course, you're not going to see any of that. And that's part of the thing. That's what propaganda is, making you believe what she tells you, point blank.
A few years ago on this channel, we had one of our celebratory episodes for episode 500 of the Daily Objective, and it was like a 3+ hour show. At the time, there was no the reality show wasn't on yet, so we did longer TDOs from time to time, and we had many senior figures in objectivism. And I remember at some point I got into this sort of impromptu short debate with Nikos and with Yaron Brook, who both of them kind of suggested that Razi does too many celebrations, too many celebratory episodes, and I stood by doing those celebratory episodes as I do today. So if we don't hear during the show, but we hear later that Nasrallah is dead, expect another one of those celebratory episodes. Yeah, we talk about such horrible things on the show, on this channel all the time, that we should be celebrating, when good things happen. And this is a good thing, even if he's not dead. It's much better if he is. But if he's not dead, it's the message is clear, and he even without a pager, he's getting it. It's a message that I think Hezbollah has been getting over the past 10 days, that Israel now means business much more than it has for a long time. And if he's in a bunker and escaped this, he is asking his people to build deeper bunkers, and yeah, he certainly is not feeling good today, if he's feeling at all. Speaking of feeling, we longtime viewers of this channel certainly know who Dr. Ellen Kenner is. She is with Ed Locke, the author of The Selfish Path to Romance. She was on multiple shows on this channel, including the psychology of the Fountainhead characters, the psychology of Atlas Shrugged characters. So a friend of the channel and of ARCUK, and she does have her own podcast, which is the sponsor of today's show. Yes, we have sponsors from time to time. Let's learn a bit more about the Dr. Ellen Kenner podcast.
The Dr. Ellen Kenner podcast.
Michelle, you're having difficulty with your husband?
Yes, he has a lot of anger for years now. He doesn't get violent, but I'm afraid he's gonna.
What are your indications that he might get violent? What have you seen?
He grabbed one of the other neighbor's arms.
And why is that not violent?
The Dr. Ellen Kenner podcast is 10 minutes of advice to callers on romance, parenting, family, and friendship conflicts. At drkenner.com, you can choose podcasts on dozens of topics and hear Dr. Kenner solve her callers' personal difficulties.
He thinks he's right.
He thinks he's right.
Right.
So if you bring a very clear mirror up to him and say, you're wrong, will he smile at that mirror and say, oh, thank you for the correction, honey? Or will he want to break the mirror?
I want to break the mirror.
And you are the mirror.
Visit drkenner.com and go to the radio podcast section. That's drkenner.com, drkenner.com.
And the link to the Dr. Kenner podcast is in the chat, is also in the description. Make sure you check that out after the show and after the roundtable for members and YouTube members. All right, back to what was going to be the topic before Nasrallah so rudely interrupted us with his hopeful demise. Another point she makes in this video is, this lie that we keep hearing about people starving in Gaza. And this lie, much like history, this lie also didn't start on October 7th. We had a show a few months ago about the different times that the UN said that famine is imminent, and it's been multiple times in the past few decades. Famine in Gaza has supposedly been imminent. It doesn't look imminent even in her videos, there's a certain certain things you'd expect to see when and other things you expect not to see when famine is imminent. First of all, you expect to see it on the people who are there. You don't see it on any single person who's shown, including the woman doing the documentary. You'd expect to see markets, not to see markets full of food. And what you do see from her, it's she shows this piece of pita which has been clearly eaten, so she showed just a little bit at the end to see. Yeah, often if you look at your plate after dinner, it's empty. That doesn't mean you're starving. And she shows this little bottle of water, which, by the way, looks like it was refrigerated, which is nice. But it's a little bottle, and there's a little bit of water in there. It's all very, very well manufactured. If you think your audience is stupid, and clearly she does, and clearly, according to the fact that this got an award, clearly so do the people voting for Emmys. Michael.
I mean, what can we say? The first thing you have to go back and say is what responsibility does Israel have to actually bring in goods to Gaza? I mean, it used to be when you fought a war, you actually fought the war, which means you attacked the enemy. And if you starved them or they ran out of water, that was part of the reason they surrendered. We all also know that as all this support for Gaza has come in, that much of it, if not most of it, goes to Hamas. And there's reports that Hamas is actually charging money back to the citizens of Gaza. Big surprise, right? Back to the citizens of Gaza to actually get the humanitarian aid so that Hamas can make more money to help fund more Hamas stuff. In other words, Hamas is doing exactly the same thing with the humanitarian aid that it's done with all of the aid that's gone to Gaza. It's co-opted most of it, if not all of it. It's the whole thing just reeks of people that are lambs to the slaughter kind of idiots. The whole way it's set up. And I do go back to this issue, though, that what needs to be said is that a war properly fought would use every available thing to stop it. She also mentioned that electricity is out and the internet is out. Well, everybody knows that you have a right to the internet all the time. And what kind of a barbaric people, except the Israelis, would deprive a young person of the internet? I mean, the implications are all quite absurd if you think about it. But like Marco and Richard said, if you just want to emote the whole time and you think about this poor girl, what is it she to do all day if she can't attend school?
Just want to comment. El Rito says, look, Razi's bottle is bigger. Yeah, but look, it is about 1/4 empty. So what's going to happen when it empties out? Where is UNRWA when you need them? Richard.
Yeah, there were several moments in it where the facts on the screen don't concur with the narrative that's driving what you're being told. I think, again, I'm in danger of merging this one with the Guardian one, so it could come from either of these particular moments. But there's one moment when a couple of kids goes into a supermarket that's largely empty, and obviously complain about the fact that it's empty and there's no stuff in there. But then also go to a market right outside, which is absolutely piled with fruit and veg. Clearly, no problem getting stuff to eat there. Just not stuff that was behind a refrigerated unit in that particular shop at that particular moment, wherever it was. And of course, there's another moment where they mentioned the fact that I think this was from the winning one, where people are selling stuff on the ground with a great pile of stuff that they've got, like a market stall based on a sheet. The voiceover or the woman makes the point that people are hoarding stuff that they get from aid, that they get because in order to make a bit of money. This is clearly far more stuff than any one individual would be given or any one family would be given. This is clearly a wholesale purchased amount of stuff that they are selling. It just doesn't fit with that narrative. You also see a kid who comes back with a piece of bread and some water, looking really smiley and excited, and she speaks to him briefly and then he runs off. She encourages him to run off back to his family. There's no suggestion as where did he get that from? Was that the aid from Israel that is supposedly not going in? Clearly he's being well fed after all. So again, that doesn't really fit. I think a lot, and the one thing that really strikes me when I watch these things is how what's absent from it. Men are always absent from it. There are no men in Gaza ever, and there's zero agency. Nobody has any agency whatsoever. They are simply human flotsam, waiting for the next thing to happen at every single moment, and never make a single decision about anything ever. Is what you're led to believe. And of course, you know, the truth is the complete opposite. You look at all of those tents just in front of the hospital where people have gathered and are living, supposedly because that's a safer spot. And why would that be the safer spot if Israel's always bombing hospitals? Again, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't stack up, any of it. But of course, it's so fast, and you're so swamped with the emotion of it all, or at least people who are, you know, sitting in a drift mode in neutral are just accepting this barrage of images without thinking that it does sadly work for far too many. But that speaks to the culture and the lack of people staying in focus and actually considering what they're hearing and verifying it and validating it.
Yeah, and going back to my point of watching the video and checking out the background, you'll see a number of fatsas in the background, and that doesn't tell me caloric deficit at all. And also, all the kind of media and people who really pound our patients on a daily basis here in the West, talking about environment, are they actually complaining about the single-use plastic bottles? What about the generous use of bags, plastic bags that seem to float around in Gaza all the time? I mean, these people are genociding the planet, and the lefty don't care suddenly. What's this about? You know, the same media who are quite happy to cover Joe Biden infirmity for 4 years, and the same media who cover for the Hunter Biden scandal during an election, are quite happy to, you know, gloss over certain things that don't quite fit their agenda. Things like, for example, the recent Iranian hack into the Republicans' candidate vice president. You know, his details have been actually published online. Why didn't they go and hack on the left? Because we know that, you know, Pezeshkian, the new prime minister in Iran, has made himself fairly clear that he wants to have a new deal following the one that they had in 2008 with Obama. And who's very easy, who's already saying they were quite happy to have a deal, apart from the Trump statement today, is the same people who did the deal, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. Kamala would be quite happy to sit around the table with a dictator from the Islamic Republic of Iran and allow them to continue refining uranium and produce great weapon uranium. And he knows that. The media knows that. But they want to keep it quiet because they don't want to highlight the fact that actually the lefties all around the world are on the side of the Islamic Republic. And the lefty all across the world wants Israel destroyed. And effectively, that's what they're doing. It's not a coincidence that all the nefarious people, the various Greta Thunberg and Corbyn, are always on the left of the agenda, or the political agenda. That's not an accident. It's a design. They are the people that push the envy, the hate for the success, and certainly they are the people who like to have a dictatorship, because they see themselves as those who will be at the receiving end of the benefits of the dictatorship.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's consistent to talk to Iran now. If Iran was awarded their previous deal for building nuclear weapons and has since, you know, actually carried out attacks, it only makes sense in the doesn't make sense at all category, but in the consistent bad principles category, to give them a better deal now. And of course, we can absolutely expect that from Kamala if she gets elected. Unfortunately, it looks like we can expect something like that from Trump. And I don't know if this is a good thing, but in this case, you never know with Trump. Whereas with Kamala, you know which side she's on. Yeah, Greta, I saw this video a couple days ago of her in London, chanting some pro-Palestinian slogans, with a microphone with loudspeakers that were on I may have mentioned this on a show, but they were on a pickup truck. And so yeah, I don't know how that happens, but yeah, it seems like she has switched causes, or I don't know. Anyway, I saw it mentioned also in the chat that what Netanyahu mentioned in his speech, that the amount of humanitarian aid that Israel sends through is 3,000 calories per person in Gaza. And I take his word for it more than Bisan. That's not a positive thing. And I don't just mean that in the sense that, if you listen to the UK government, an adult should only have 2,000 calories a day. So, maybe we're killing them by making them obese. I mean that in the sense that you are feeding your enemy. This is not something to brag about. It's only something to brag about if you want to go to the UN and beg for people who just want you to die to like you and accept that it's okay for you to live, which they never will. So I go back to a point I made in the Daily Objective. I'm all for Mahmoud Abbas's proposal to have Israel kicked out of the UN. That is a first step in the right direction of showing what the UN is. Israel doesn't fit the values of the vast majority of these countries. Neither does the US, although the current administration is trying. Neither does Britain. And yeah, let's hope that is the first step into on the road to a separation between free countries and vile dictatorships, and enough of legitimizing such regimes by the West. Parting thoughts, and where can people find you, Michael?
Just to finish up on the UN, yeah, it's clearly an institution that needs to be burned to the ground, and we all need to run as far away as possible for it. Maybe start it off with decent goals. But one thing that people make a mistake of is that having a majority opinion doesn't matter. It doesn't make anything right. And I often say, a long time ago, the majority of the world believed the world was flat. They could vote on it, and they would have absolutely overwhelmingly voted that the world was flat, except that the truth is the world is not flat. And that's the problem with majority rules. And frankly, at least in the US, that was part of the goal of our two parliament system, or two congressional house system. Was we have the Senate where everybody's represented with 2 representatives per state, and then we have the majority sort of fit in the House of Representatives separately. So we try to get to both. And as Bill Maher says, just because the world voted that obesity is not really a health risk because it's common doesn't mean it's not a health risk. Of course, it's a health risk. So the UN, the fact that the UN has more countries that are broken and despotic and have no interest in their people doesn't make it right. And that's been a huge problem. The second problem, of course, is that the UN is called the United Nations, which is a great set of marketing material, but it's all propaganda. We need to get rid of it. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why there's not more criticism of that organization and an attempt to reform it, while the US is forking over, I don't know if it's hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to help support it. People can find me at LinkedIn, Kaufman with 2 Fs. Thanks.
Richard, Marco, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
Sure. I think my parting thoughts are also to mention that there were various organizations that tried to flag up this particular journalist or reporter's past, particularly including the PFLP membership. When they looked into that, they claimed there wasn't enough evidence, and anyway, it was 6 or 8 years ago. As if suddenly in this particular case, your past doesn't matter anymore. Whereas, for other people, what you did when you were 14 and drinking out of blue cups is there to mar you for life. So it's fascinating how there's such a double standard there. But of course, this is somebody who has already appeared on murals in London. There's a mural to this woman in Brixton in London to add to all the other murals of luminaries such as George Floyd. Where you can find us on places like the Briefly Objective, and there's a video coming out I think at 7 o'clock on the Briefly Objective called Why.
That has been postponed to 8 because we have the meeting at 7, so we don't want to compete with ourselves.
Awesome.
Yeah,
well, if you can wait 1 hour, then you can see why people distrust the mainstream media, which includes Ben Bayer as the voice of that one. So please do check that out.
Yeah, and that's quite an important one because, as I mentioned earlier on, when somebody shows you this barrage of images, don't just take them for face value. Just try and understand what the policy behind it, what they're actually really trying to push, because most of the time they're not after your interest.
I'm Razi Ginsburg on X. I will also be in the meeting for members that starts in a couple of minutes. So if you are a member, join the Zoom link, a YouTube member, watch the live stream. That starts in a couple of minutes. Again, the next show that's scheduled is the Daily Objective tomorrow. But if there's a reason to have a celebration, we will have a celebratory episode perhaps. Before that, we are watching the news and keeping a close eye. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.